Okay, here we go with the book of Genesis. We will take 2 hours, one lesson now, and a part 2 of Genesis the next hour. So 2 lessons on Genesis. Remember, this is not a verse-by-verse exposition. These are the highlights of the book. We won't go verse by verse, but we will go by themes, overall ideas. Father God, thank you for your word. And as we come to the book of Genesis now, the first book in the Bible canon, may this edify, encourage, and enlighten all of us. And in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. So, the book of Genesis. It's an enormous book, 50 chapters, 1,553 verses, 38,267 words. It's the first of Moses' 5 books, the Pentateuch. It's also called the Torah. The first 5 books of the Bible, they're also called the Torah, Pentateuch or Torah, Pentateuch 5. So, as a brief introduction to Genesis, I'm going to read this verse, Acts 7, verse 22. And Moses was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians, and was mighty in words and in deeds. Moses was an educated man. There's this idea that Moses was a country bumpkin, an ignoramus, and there's no way he could have written the books of Genesis through Deuteronomy. Well, here, Stephen, who's preaching in Acts 7, he wasn't under the impression that Moses was a dummy. Moses was skilled in all the wisdom of the Egyptians. The Egyptians knew about mathematics, art, culture, history, music, and so on, science. Moses got that education. And when we get to the book of Exodus, you will see that. So the Bible begins with the book of Genesis. And that's most appropriate because Genesis, that is the book of beginnings or origins. In the beginning, God. Bereshith is the Hebrew title for the name of the book, because that's the first 3 words. In the beginning. Bereshith, one word, but in Hebrew. But Genesis, the origin. Where did the world come from? Where did the universe come from? The heaven and the earth. Who made it? Why? The first Bible book in the canon will tell us. So the span of Genesis is from creation to Israel in Egypt. That's Adam's creation to Joseph's death. Archbishop Ussher and Dr. Schofield quotes Ussher. The book of Genesis spans roughly 4004 BC, the creation of Adam, to 1700 BC, which is the death of Joseph. 2,300 years. That's a long period of time covered. 50 chapters cover 2,300 years of human history. The first 11 chapters of Genesis cover 1,900 years of time. And the last 39 chapters of Genesis cover 400 years. Now that's certainly strange, huh? 11 chapters for 1,900 years, but then God would spend 39 chapters to cover just 400 years. Why so little time on so much time? Why so little time spent on so much time? And why so much time spent on so little time there? Now hopefully that doesn't sound like nonsense, but the book of Genesis, let me also say, is a literal book. You take it literally, word for word. The scoffer says, oh, well, the first 11 chapters That's an allegory. That's not literal, that's figurative. It's chapter 12 where it becomes literal. Well, who gave you that idea? Who gave you that authority to say what's literal in the Bible and what isn't? It is literal. Genesis is literal. From chapter 1 to chapter 50. And if you want to say the opening is figurative and the rest is literal, well, that sounds silly. How do you know any of it would be literal then? If it starts off allegorical, what makes you think it would switch to reality? See, the speculations of the unsaved human mind. Better get saved, and better, if you are saved, stop engaging in the speculations of lost people who don't have a clue what the Bible speaks about anyway. The key verses, we will show the key verses of the book of Genesis. It'd be Genesis chapter 1 verses 26 to 28. There are 4 divine institutions. And remember, God is setting the stage for human civilization. There are 4 institutions that He establishes here in the book of Genesis, and we will see all 4 in this hour. Volition, marriage, family, nationalism. There are 2 divisions of Genesis. One is the time from Adam to Abraham. The other is from Abraham to Joseph. Those are the 2 divisions. Creation is divided into 2 realms. Verse 1, Genesis 1 verse 1. Watch. In the beginning God created the heaven and the earth. The 2 realms. God created the heaven and the earth. If we go to Colossians 1, we're going to have to really blaze through. Colossians 1 verse 16. For by Him were all things created that are in heaven and that are in earth, visible and invisible, whether they be thrones or dominions or principalities or powers, all things were created by Him and for Him. That is God the Son, by the way. Verse 13, His dear Son, by Him, by Jesus Christ. All things were created. So the Creator God in Genesis 1:1 is the Lord Jesus Christ before He became a man there. And in addition to the heaven and the earth, there are also realms, governmental offices, thrones, dominions, principalities, powers, mights elsewhere. Every name that's named, that's in Ephesians. These ranks of government, like president, mayor, governor, that kind of thing. These offices of government exist in heaven and earth. So in addition to a creation, there's also offices that God put in the creation for government, for order. For order. There are 5 major events in Genesis. The creation, the fall, the flood, the Tower of Babel, and Israel. Now in part 1, we will discuss the creation, the fall, the flood, and Babel. Part 2, it'll be Israel. There are 3 covenants, 3 agreements God makes with man, or a segment of man, in the book of Genesis. The Noahic covenant, the Abrahamic covenant, and the Palestinian covenant. The book, by the way, starts off with life and it ends with death. Why? There's a transition. So, we're going to go to chapter 1 and we will read chapter 1, Genesis 1 verse 1. In the beginning God created the heaven and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. See, when God works, the Spirit of God works. He speaks. And God said, let there be light, and there was light. And God saw the light, and it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness He called night. The evening and the morning were the first day. So we will read about in chapter 1, days. These are 24-hour literal days. Remember I said this is literal here? The evening and the morning were the first day. Well, isn't that how we reckon time, as an evening and a morning? See, it's literal. If it's figurative, why bother to give such details? So, on the first day, of creation, day and night. And day and night are separated. Light from darkness. Day 2 of creation, the creation week. And God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. So God makes a firmament, He divides the waters above the firmament from the waters below the firmament. And the firmament is called heaven, verse 8. The evening and the morning were the second day. And see, there's going to be a third day now. Let the waters under the heaven be gathered together unto one place, and the dry land let it appear. It was so. God called the dry land earth. He gathered the waters. They're called seas. He called them seas. God saw that it was good. Let's see. Okay, verse 11. God said, let the earth bring forth grass, and the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself, upon the earth. And it was so. And the earth brought forth grass, and herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit, whose seed was in itself, after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the third day. So see now, where there's the third day. Then the fourth day, let the lights be in the firmament of the heaven, to divide the day from the night, for signs and for seasons. And let them be for signs and for seasons, for days, for years. Let them be for lights in the firmament of heaven, to give light upon the earth. So God made 2 great lights. The greater light to rule the day, that's the sun, and the lesser light to rule the night, that's the moon. He made the stars also. Sometime at the beginning of the creation week, if we go to the book of Job, before God created anything else, the book of Job, chapter 38, verse 4, where was thou when I laid the foundations of the earth? Declare if thou hast understanding. Who hath laid the measures thereof, if thou knowest, or who hath stretched the line upon it? See, God is like a carpenter with a tape measure and so on. Whereupon are the foundations thereof fastened? Or who laid the cornerstone thereof? When the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy. While God is creating here and making things, there are angels that He has already made, and they're watching Him work, and they're singing for joy. They're watching Him work, and they're wondering what He's doing. All right. And God set them, these lights, in the firmament of the heaven, to give light upon the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. The evening and the morning were the fourth day. And then the fifth day, He's going to bring forth marine life. Let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that hath life. See? And fowl that may fly above the earth. Birds. And they fly in the open firmament of heaven. And God created great whales and every living creature that moves, which the waters brought forth abundantly after their kind, and every winged fowl after his kind. God saw it was good. God blessed them. He told them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the waters and the seas, and let the fowl multiply in the earth. There's the fifth day. Evening and the morning were the fifth day. Now the sixth day comes to pass. Let the earth, God says, see, God is working by speaking. There's power in His Word. And He doesn't take items and makes them with His hands like we would do. Construction. He just says, let there be, and there it is. Boop. Ex nihilo. Just comes out of thin air. Because He spoke it. What a powerful God, huh? And God said, let the earth bring forth the living creature after his kind, cattle and creeping thing, and beasts of the field, beasts of the earth after his kind. And it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth after his kind, cattle after their kind, everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind. And God saw that it was good. So now He makes the land, the terrestrial animals. And then you see, God says, verse 26, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air. Here is the theme of the book of Genesis. And over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. So God created man in his own image, and in the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. God blessed them. And God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth on the face of the earth. And God said, behold, I have given you every herb bearing seed, which is on the face of all the earth, and every tree, and the which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for meat, food, and to every beast of the earth, and to every fowl of the air, and to everything that creeps upon the face of the earth, wherein there is life, I have given every green herb for meat, and it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And the evening and the morning were the sixth day. So here we have 6 days of creation. And the last thing God makes is man. Now chapter 2 will hone in on that 6th day of creation, as well as the 7th day of rest, the Sabbath day. What we can gather here, we can go to Hebrews 1, verses 1 through 4, Revelation 4, verse 11. For thy pleasure and glory these things were and are created. God created all things by Jesus Christ, Ephesians 3, verse 9. And in Ephesians 1, verse 10, that in the dispensation of the fullness of times, God will gather in one all things in Christ, and the all things are those offices of government. Well, here, man's role is to be a leader, God's king on the earth. Genesis 26, 28, let him have dominion. Let man have dominion. You see, we are above the animals. We're not an animal species. Don't let the scientists tell you that we're just another animal. The human species was created here. Adam is created in God's image. That is never ever said of an animal. The animals are the ones ruling the planet. God says man is to do that. Man is my king over the earth. I've given him, he has divine authority over the animals. And so all these silly people who go around worshiping nature, they may be sincere, but they're sincerely wrong. God says man is more valuable to me than animals. And so, you know, when there are people, it's sad to say, there are people who would bawl their eyes out if you picked an endangered species bird egg. And you know what? They wouldn't think of half a second to butcher an unborn human baby in the womb of the mother. Oh, they say, so what? Now see, that's how demented human nature is when you toss out the Bible. Pitiful. Pitiful that we would squall over the death of an animal and we couldn't care less about the death of a person. Awful. Absolutely awful. Genesis chapter 2. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the 7th day God ended his work which he had made, and he rested on the 7th day from all his work which he hath made. And God blessed the 7th day and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work which God created and made. God created some things and he made some things. He created things from nothing, then he took those things and made other things. The 7th day is rest in the Bible. The Sabbath day, that will appear in the book of Exodus, in the 10 Commandments. Israel is to respect, to honor the Sabbath day because God did. back in our introduction of the Old Testament survey there, we said that the whole theme of the Old Testament, the prophetic program, is an earthly kingdom. That kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. Matthew 25, verse 34. See, man is told here, be fruitful and multiply. Why? Because there's a kingdom for man to populate and rule over in the earth. Man is to rule over the animals, rule over the earth. Now, I would like for you to understand, just like Adam is of the earth, earthy, there's the second man, or the last Adam, and he's the Lord from heaven. So, in addition to Adam as the first man, there's going to be another man who will come along later in Bible history, and we know him as Jesus Christ. You can go read that in 1 Corinthians 15, 38 to 41. It says, there are different fleshes. There's a flesh for man. Well, let me flip to it, and I'll just read it to you very quickly. 1 Corinthians 15. All flesh is not the same flesh. 39. One flesh of men, one of beasts, another of fishes, and another of birds. Now see, that blows evolutionary theory right out of the water, doesn't it? All flesh is not the same flesh. And the evolutionary theory proponent says all creatures descended from one common ancestor. Wrong. That verse, those verses say all flesh is not the same flesh. And if you look in Genesis 1, you will see the order of the evolution in science is different from the order of creation here in Genesis 1. That's why people don't like the Bible and they say, well, don't take it literally. Do you know why? It's because science is contradicted. And they would prefer the speculations of men over the Bible. But you know what? We are simply going to say, God said it, we believe it, that's that. And if man wants to say and believe something else, hey, have at it. We'll see where it gets you, and we'll see where the Bible gets us. And in the end, you can bet your last penny that the Bible will not disappoint and science will. You can bet your last penny. God's Word here in Genesis chapter 2, it just finished the 6 days with the 7th day. Now it's going to go back and pick up. It's going to loop. See, it's going to loop back to chapter 1, the 6th day, the creation of man. That man is God put man in a garden eastward in Eden. So Eden is a gigantic territory. And I will put here the Persian Gulf, the Tigris River, like that, and the Euphrates River, like that. You look in Genesis 2, verse 13 and 14, and you will see 4 rivers meeting there. 11, 12, 13, 14. At verse 10, actually, the 4 rivers meet. Now, we don't know what 2 of those rivers are, but we know the other 2, verse 14, Hiddekel and the Euphrates. Of course, the Hiddekel is the Tigris, and the Euphrates, of course, is the Euphrates River. The Tigris is here. This is modern day. Euphrates is here. I have to think for a minute, huh? Spell it. Euphrates, Eden, and you see we don't have a lot of room, and we have the Mediterranean Sea here, Med, and we have the, oh goodness, the Promised Land and so on right here. This is not the scale, but anyway. Sea of Galilee, the Dead Sea, Sinai Peninsula, Egypt is right here, Tigris, Euphrates. We have the Caspian Sea here, and the Black Sea up here. Black. All right, that's enough for now. That map will come in handy later. Persian Gulf. We have a giant place called Eden here. And it's you look at the verses, there are many verses to use. Eden is something like this. This is Eden. This whole area is Eden. The Garden of Eden is where the Tigris and Euphrates and those other rivers meet, which would be here, eastward in Eden. See, Eden is a region. The garden is eastward in Eden. And that's the Garden of Eden that we're reading about here in chapter 2 of Genesis. So God puts these trees in the garden. There are all sorts of trees, but there's one in particular. Look at verse 15. God took the man, put him in the garden to dress it and to keep it. And God commanded him, of every tree you may freely eat. The knowledge of the tree of good and evil, thou shalt not eat of it. For in the day that thou eatest thereof, thou shalt surely die. It's a fact. And God said, it's not good that man should be alone. So he makes him a helpmeet for him. And so God shows Adam, look at all the different animals you're naming. See, Adam is a smart man. He doesn't grunt and like that. He speaks intelligently. He names these animals. God says, you work and you name the animals a job. Adam gave names to all the animals. And you know what? Adam, as he sees the male and female of each coming to him to be named, there's no woman, there's nobody like him. And he sees that need for a companion. And so God says, I'll make him a companion. It's not that God forgot, oops, I better make him a... God wanted Adam to learn the lesson. And so there's the first marriage here. And the woman is not named until chapter 3, Eve. Adam calls his wife Eve, chapter 3, verse 20. But God takes from Adam a rib. So Adam would love the wife. Not from his foot, by the way, so he'd stomp on her. Adam would love the wife, and there would be a leaving of the father and mother. The man would leave the father and mother, and he would cleave to his wife, and they would be one flesh. They were both naked, the man and his wife, and were not ashamed. It was monogamy, one man and one woman, husband and wife. It wasn't two men. It wasn't two women. And it wasn't one man with 5 wives. And it wasn't one woman with 4 husbands. There was not to be. There was nothing here about divorce whatsoever. Nothing. There was no divorce there. There was no sin. There was no suffering. There was no fighting and bickering and marital problems and marriage counseling. Nope. Sin has not yet entered the world. So God puts Adam to sleep. He makes the woman from that rib that he takes from Adam. And now here comes the adversary. It was so good. 7 days of creation. God sees everything very good. But here comes opposition. Here comes Satan. The serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And he said unto the woman, Yea, hath God said, Ye shall not eat of every tree of the garden. And the woman said unto the serpent, We may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God hath said, Ye shall not eat of it, neither shall ye touch it, lest ye die. And the serpent said to the woman, Ye shall not surely die. For God doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be open, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. See, so Satan's tempting Eve here. And see, Eve doesn't even know what God said. God told the man, and the man was supposed to tell the woman. Now, either Adam failed to tell the woman what God said, or Eve forgot what God through Adam told her. Whatever the case though, you read Genesis 3 and Eve doesn't ask her husband for enlightenment. Hey, what did God say? And Adam doesn't lead her in spiritual truth either. He's not the spiritual leader and she's not the spiritual follower. And it's a guaranteed failure. So here come the marital problems. Here they come. The woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree to be desired to make one wise. She took of the fruit thereof, and did eat, and gave also unto her husband with her, and he did eat. And the eyes of them were both open. They knew they were naked. They sewed fig leaves. Here they go. Okay, they intruded into a place where God said, you don't eat of that tree. Now you notice Eve says we shouldn't touch it. God never said anything about not touching. He says you don't eat it. They could have touched it. They just couldn't eat it. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil is to be your own God and say, I'm going to decide for myself what's good and what's evil. Not to understand right from wrong. No, to judge what's right and what's wrong. That's God's prerogative. Not Satan's, not Adam's, not Eve's. Adam and Eve. And it was really Adam because he's the leader. He should have stopped it and said, we are not going to be our own gods. We are God's followers, not gods ourselves, Satan. See, Satan was already working as his own God. Now, he had already rebelled against the God of creation. He's doing his own thing. Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28. The serpent, by the way, it's not a literal snake that goes and you find in the woods and the forests. The serpent there, we talk about people, a snake in the grass. Well, no, certainly they don't slither around with scales and hiss. That's a figure of speech. They're a snake in character. They're deceptive. Well, that's here. Satan is in the form, in a form that looks good. Now, he could have very well evidently been in the form of a man, and he looked good. He certainly didn't look at them as a snake and go, that's ridiculous. He was a cherub, the Bible says. He's a special race of spirit beings that God created. Not an angel per se, but something like an angel, if you want to say that. So what happens is, Adam and Eve, they do something God said don't do. So when they hear God walking, they heard the voice of the Lord God walking in the garden in the cool of the day. When they hear God walking, they go, uh-oh, and they're naked. Their glowing bodies that had the righteousness of God, now that righteousness is gone, that light is gone, and you know what? They're stark in the nude. And when they hear God coming, uh-oh, and so they hurry up and they make fig leaves, aprons to cover their behinds, naked behinds. You see, there's religion popping up right there. Man does something wrong. Man doesn't say, oh God, please help me. Man says, I've got that under control. And put it around that behind, and I'm covered. Now you know what? Those fig leaves, they're going to shrivel off, and you know what? You'll be naked again. Itchy, itchy fig leaves. Would you care to wear itchy fig leaves? I wouldn't. But see, that's the desperation of man. He has to find something to put on his behind because God's coming. And they hide. God's coming. We can't be seen. See, even after they put on those fig leaves, they hid. As if they were, I wonder if that's going to be enough covering. Just in case, we'll hide as well. And God says, where are you? It's not God saying, where did they go? What God is, confess. What have you done wrong? You're supposed to be walking with me. Instead, you're hiding. See? Did I tell you not to eat? Did you do what I told you not to do? And you see, Adam, he should have said, yes, I did. And I'm sorry? No. See, what he says is, the woman you gave me, Lord. See, the blame is passed from Adam to the woman, but really to God. God, you gave me that woman, and that woman made me sin. No. 1 Timothy 2 says, the woman was deceived. Adam was not deceived. Adam knew all along what he was doing, and he willfully followed Eve, following Satan. And so, when God asked Eve, what is this that thou hast done? The woman says, the serpent, you know what? The devil made me do it. See? And so here we go with the curse coming in now. So there's the fall of man. There's the curse on creation. Here comes the sickness. Here comes the suffering. Here comes the thorns. Here comes the thistles. Here come the child labor pains. The travailing. The childbirth. It's all coming now. The marital problems, they're here to stay. The dust, verse 19, they're going to sweat. Their face is going to sweat. They're going to work, and they're going to die. For dust thou art, and to dust thou shalt return. So God made the man from the dust of the earth. Genesis 2 verse 7, God formed the man of the dust of the ground. The elements that are in the ground, in earth's crust, earth's surface, those are elements in our bodies. That's how we know the book of Genesis in those opening chapters are literal. The Bible is not a scientific textbook, but when it speaks of science, it speaks accurately. And God says, you know all those elements in your body? That body's going back to the ground, and those elements are going with it. Back to the ground. And so what God does, verse 21, unto Adam also and to his wife, the Lord God made coats of skins and clothed them. God had an answer. He killed some animals, shed some blood, and gave them some clothes with the skins of those animals. It's what God does. Grace in Eden. There was sin in Eden. There was penance in Eden with the suffering of the itchy fig leaves. But that didn't cover any of it. Genesis 3:21 says the only thing that's going to cover physically naked bodies before God there, and the only thing that's going to cover them spiritually, is the coats of the skins of the animals whose blood was shed. The blood is going to cover their souls, and those skins is going to cover their behinds. So Adam and Eve, they're kicked out of the garden. So here we go with Cain and Abel now. So Cain is born and Abel is born. Now back in chapter 3 verse 15, one thing, God says, I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed. It shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. Despite what Adam and Eve have done, God says there'll be a man one day who will come. And he's telling us really, he's talking to Satan. He says, the seed of the woman will come. The seed of the woman will bruise Satan's head, and Satan will bruise the seed of the woman's heel. That is the issue of the bloodline of the Messiah. So we've transitioned from the dispensation of innocence, they're no longer innocent, over into the dispensation of promise. So here, dispensation number 2 starts, the promise, and that's going to continue all the way through. Dispensation of promise. So the curse is put in, God has a remedy, and Romans 8 says there's coming a day when the curse will be lifted. The sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in us. The whole creation groaneth and travaileth in pain together until now, and not only they but ourselves also which have the first fruits of the Spirit. Christians are suffering and dying all the time. We're not exempt from the curse. But why is there evil? Why is there wickedness? Here you go, Genesis 3. It was not God's intention to have sickness, disease, and death, and suffering. That's what man did. Never ever blame God for what man has done, for what we have done. Don't blame shift like Adam did and Eve did. Just say, you know what? I'm guilty. There. See, but the pride of man says, I'm better than that. I'm good enough. That's the Operation Fig Leaf they're covering with the fig leaves. It's not going to work. Shriveled old fig leaves. So in chapter 4, now we see antagonistic religion now. Extreme, fervent, heartless religion. And so Cain and Abel, they're the first two sons of Adam and Eve. God shed that blood back in chapter 3. God expects Adam and Eve and their descendants to start shedding that animal's blood for those sins now. And so what Cain does, Cain offers and Abel offers. See, Abel offers, then Cain. God had respect to Abel's offering, but not Cain's. You see, by faith, Hebrews 11 says, Abel offered the better sacrifice. 1 John 3 says, righteous was Abel and evil was Cain. So what Cain does is a religious war that starts here. Cain hates the fact that Abel's sacrifice is accepted. Abel brought the blood sacrifice by faith because God said to do it. Cain said, I'm not worried about a blood sacrifice. I'm a farmer. My brother's a tender of sheep there. He is going to, Abel's going to bring the sheep, but I'm going to bring something of my own hands. I'm going to work. Work, 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 work. Doesn't that sound familiar? That's religion today. Work, 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 work. And you work your fingers to the bone. And you know what? How disappointed was Cain when God says, you see all that stuff you brought here that you worked and labored to grow and you produced, whatever it was, fruits, vegetables. God says, nope, I didn't tell you to bring it, and I'm not accepting it. And Cain said, oh, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take my brother. I'm going to kill him. I'm going to get rid of that man who represents God's testimony against me. So, don't be shocked when you read in the newspaper about a mother and a father torturing a child, or a brother killing a brother or a sister, or somebody killing their parents, beating up on their grandparents. Whatever the case, right there, fratricide occurred for the first time. Cain killed his brother Abel. That's all you need to know about sin. With the fall of man now, that's all you need to know about the human heart. The heart is deceitful above all things, desperately wicked. There it is. So Cain refuses to follow God's instructions. He's not a man of faith, so he killed his brother Abel. And 1 John 3, which is going to talk about saints beyond our day, God tells them in another dispensation, one future from us, God tells those saints, don't marvel that the world hate you, because Cain hated his brother Abel. They will hate you too for the same reason. One is following the false religion, one's following the true way to God. And so there's that spiritual war. It started back in Eden, and now it's just going to work its way through to the next generation, Cain and Abel. So Cain is cursed. Then God says, you're going to wonder now. You're a farmer? You're going to wonder. Cain says, I ain't doing that. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to settle and I'm going to build a city. So the first city is built in Genesis 4, and it's built in rebellion against God. Cain says, I'm not moving anywhere. I'm going to settle, and he did. And so there's that battle intensifying. And so there's a civilization of humanity. Here it comes. You read the close of Genesis 4, you read about music, metallurgy, arts, and agriculture. See, man is growing in his understanding and knowledge. He's brilliant. And it's going to get out of control by the time of Genesis 6. God's going to put an end to that. He's going to say, I've had enough of man's wickedness and self-will, self-sufficiency, doing his own thing. So Genesis chapter 5 is an overview of the genealogy that comes from Adam. All the different people who come from Adam, beginning and going all the way through to Noah. And you read in verse 5, verse 3, Adam begat a son in his own likeness, after his image, and called him Seth. See, not God's image anymore. Now it's man's fallen image. It's Adam's fallen image. And so you read on through, down at the bottom, and you read where it says, verse 28, Lamech begat a son. His name is Noah. So Noah's born, and Noah has 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. By the time you get to chapter 6, God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart were only evil continually. Now it's getting worse and worse and worse. It repented that the Lord he had made man. So Noah finds grace in the eyes of the Lord. God says, you build an ark. And you read on through. That ark is going to be something like 450 feet long. It's going to be 75 feet wide. And it will be about 45 feet high. He's to put pitch on it. The pitch is going to keep the flood waters out of the ark. There's going to be a global flood. It is a global flood. Otherwise, why build an ark if it's a regional flood? Just move out of the way. But God says, you bring the animals in, you bring them 2 by 2. The unclean animals, you bring them 2 by 2. The clean animals, you bring them 7 by 7. And Noah's going to offer them. So God has Noah build that ark. A flood will come. And for over a year, the waters of that flood cover the earth, and they're receding and so on. And yes, that really happened. It was a global flood. It was not a regional flood. It was a global flood. All the way through these chapters, it's a global flood. Chapters 6, 7, and 8. You read it? Certainly the time frame that's involved here is not a regional flood whatsoever. So God says, a flood's coming. Noah, you build that ark. And it says that Noah moved with fear, built that ark, and to the saving of his house. So he builds that ark, he puts those animals in that ark, and God lets man have an opportunity. Come on in the ark for 7 days. Come on in. Not a one person showed up. In 120 years, Noah, all Noah had was 7 converts. His wife, their 3 sons, and their 3 daughters-in-law. That's it. 8. Noah was the 8th person in the ark. God, the God of the Bible, never has the masses following him. So when you hear these people who say, well, how can that be true? So few believe it. Well, let me ask you a question. If the flood were true, how come so few believed it? Well, the flood was true and so few believed it. And you know what? The ones who didn't, they died. So never put numbers on truth and say, well, a lot of people have to believe it before it's true. No, truth is truth regardless of who believes it. If anyone, God still believes it. And with God, it's the majority. Okay, so God preserves the human race. Remember that seed line is still the issue. The seed of the woman has to be preserved. Satan has done his best in Genesis 6 to corrupt that seed line. And God says, that's fine. I've still got my man, his wife, his sons, their sons and their wives. That seed of that Messiah, that seed of that Redeemer, that bloodline, that human race that has to go all the way back to Adam. And why is that important? We'll discover that later. That bloodline that goes through Noah and his sons, that is the bloodline going back to Adam, and that's the bloodline that will be saved on the ark, ready for that time when Messiah, once they step off the ark, Messiah can be born at some future time, but it'll be through their lineage. It'll be through their lineage. Now, here we see the Noahic covenant, and God promises once Noah steps off the ark, He commissions them just like Adam and Eve. In Genesis chapter 9 here, all that violence is gone. Now there's human government. He says, you kill somebody. God says, kill somebody. Then that person will be shed. That person's blood will be shed. The death penalty. So God's going to establish a covenant. He'll never flood the world again. And that's true even today. That flood that came over all the planet as the ark floated. And that ark was nothing more than a box, by the way. It's not a tugboat. The ark that Adam built was simply a plain box with a slope roof. But it was just a simple cardboard box is basically what it looked like. Nothing fancy. All it needed to do was float. It didn't need to go anywhere specifically. And by the way, Genesis 7 verse 1, God says, come into the ark. God was in the ark. See, the modern versions change and say, go into the ark. No, the King James Bible says, come into the ark. That means God was in the ark, and God was the one who shut the door. No doubt Satan wanted to open that door, and there would have went the whole human race when it drowned. God shut that door, and there wasn't a soul anywhere who could open it once God closed it. So in Genesis 9, Noah and his family step off the ark, and poor Noah, he loses his testimony through drunkenness. And you can read all about that. But Noah has done his service to God, and now he's off on the deep end. Sad. Okay, Genesis 10. Genesis 9, 10, and 11, we see Noah's 3 sons step off the ark, and all the people today branch off. All of us branch off from those 3 sons of Noah. The different nations, the Gentile nations branch off in Genesis 10. So by the time we get to Genesis 11, we will see a hint of what was going on back in Genesis chapter 10 there, about Nimrod beginning the kingdom of Babel. Genesis 10 verse 10. So all these nations are forming, and God splits them up. God splits them up. We had marriage, Adam and Eve. We had the free will, the issue of volition back. He didn't say you will not eat. He says you may freely eat. You see, free will, volition. You cannot eat, but he gave them that chance. Do we eat or not? There was a free will. He gave them the marriage, Adam and Eve. He gave them a family, Abel and Cain, Cain and Abel. The marriage falls apart in Genesis 3. Free will is all perverted in Genesis 3 as well. They make the wrong choice. And then, of course, Cain kills his brother Abel, so family falls apart. Well, here's another institution of God now. Nationalism. God institutes nations. He's splitting them up. And Acts 17 says the reason why God is splitting up these nations is because evil is working so mightily. We need to be sure the boundaries are there to keep evil from spreading. National boundaries are there. Evil can only spread so much. It can't go beyond those national boundaries because another government watches the other side of the boundary. Restricting Satan's policy of evil. Now, in chapter 11, we see Satan working to reverse nationalism, and what he does is he promotes internationalism. Let's get everybody together. See, the ecumenical people. We don't need border walls. We don't need borders. Let everybody come in. Now, that's not a Bible believer who says that. Satan is the one who says, let's break down all the barriers and fellowship with each other regardless of religion and nationality, and let everybody come in. And have everyone communing around one common goal, United Nations. Well, here are the United Nations of the Old Testament, Genesis 11. The whole earth was of one speech and of one language and one speech. So they came to the land of Shinar, and they built there. Okay, so Noah's family comes off the ark, and what they do is, in the land of Shinar, that, by the way, Shinar, Babylon is in that same, that's modern day Iraq. Right here, modern day Iraq. The Mesopotamia, Fertile Crescent, this area right there. There's the Tower of Babel built, constructed. Verse 4, go to, let us build us a city and a tower whose top may reach unto heaven. Let us make a name, lest we be scattered. God said, scatter? We ain't scattering. Well, you know what? That sounds just like Cain, doesn't it? See that rebellious nature of man? And so, the city and the tower, the tower may reach unto heaven, whose top may reach unto heaven. That's religion. There's a political religious entity that man is trying to establish there, not under God's control, under Satan's control. So here, God put man there to have dominion for his glory, and man is now cooperating in that same region after the flood, after the cleansing. Man is operating with Satan here to counterfeit what God does. And so here's another city, Babylon. So Babylon is built, and God institutes the languages. Where did the languages of the world come from? Right there, Genesis 11. God confuses the languages. Verse 6, Genesis 11:6. The Lord said, behold, the people is one, and they have all one language. And this they begin to do. And now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. Go to, let us go down, and there confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. Therefore is the name of it called Babel. Babel, confusion. The Lord scattered them. And so you read about the generations of Shem, chapter 11, verse 10, Shem. And so we're going to be introduced to somebody named Abram. Later he'll be called Abraham. But what God does is, Romans chapter 1, they didn't want to retain God in their knowledge, so God gave them up. God gave them up. God gave them over. God gave them up and over. He gave the nations over to what they wanted. They didn't want to worship Him. They didn't want to acknowledge His existence. So, what God does is, see, all the nations are on one level all up to this point. They could have done what Adam and Eve failed to do. Noah and his descendants could have done what Adam and Eve failed to do. They didn't. They failed to do it too. They didn't reign on earth for God's glory. So God now pulls one man from Noah's sons, and it's Shem. And Shem is going to have a son way down in the centuries coming. 2 centuries, something like that. Shem will have a son, and that man will be Abram. So God will give up the nations over to what they want. Give them over to the superstitions they want. That pagan idolatry at the Tower of Babel, which is really a picture of what's to come in the future. We will see in Revelation the whore of Babylon. That perverted religious system that Cain was dabbling in. But then you see, Cain was just one of several men who got involved in that. And of course, Nimrod came and he started Babel, and he built on what Cain was starting. And then of course God stopped it. God will let them continue in the future with that Babylonian religious system. Really, the modern manifestation of that is Roman Catholicism. You study the details of that. So Israel will now be formed. And so God will take, see, all these nations that are gathered at Babel, they're scattered. God forces them to scatter. They can't understand anything anymore. They can't fellowship with each other and cooperate with each other to build that city and that tower. So they scatter, hopelessly confused. God is going to now pull one man aside, Abram, and make a new nation, and that nation, Israel, will be an indication to the nations around that this is what God's people look like. This is the one true God's people, Israel. And look at all you ignoramuses here around the idols, all over the world, with their nonsense. The Gentiles. So let me quickly go. We're going to soon close part 1 of Genesis. Acts 14. Very quickly. You can go to Romans 1, but Acts 14, verse 16. God, who in times past suffered all nations to walk in their own ways. There it is. That's the Tower of Babel there. He let them walk in their own ways, and so he gives them over, gives the nations over. Chapter 17, Acts 17:30. At this time, and the times of this ignorance God winked at, but now commandeth all men everywhere to repent. See, there was a time when God winked, he overlooked their idolatry. Now it's time for the nations to give up that nonsense back in Genesis 11. And see, Paul is God's spokesman there. And where God pulled Israel aside from the nations, now God says in Paul's ministry, he says, now God isn't dealing with Israel. God wants all men everywhere to repent, change their mind. Stop thinking about God, the one true God, as a bunch of silly idols of wood and stone and metal, silver and gold. So Abraham will be taken from the nations. Abram, he's first called. He will be taken from the nations, and the nation Israel will start to form. So from Genesis 12 on, we're now going to do the nation Israel and her beginning. All right, Father God, thank you for this time of study. We covered quite a bit of ground, and we didn't do it nearly the justice it deserves, but this overview, we hope that this will greatly help your people understand your word. In Christ's name with thanksgiving, amen.